Hello and welcome to our bi-weekly Fireside Friday chats. Yay! Thank you for being here. You are watching the OCD Gamechangers channel on Facebook. OCD Gamechangers is a nonprofit dedicated to spreading awareness, creating community, and doing all kinds of things that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment. And my role is the founder and executive director. My name is Chrissy Hodges, and I'm also a certified peer support specialist. I work with people around the world. I also run groups with OCD peers at ocdpeers.com. And I am the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. I'm really excited about this topic. I am going to tell you I'm a little red because I'm a little nervous. This is a tough topic, but I thought Justin and I talked a few weeks ago, exchanged some emails, and we were like, let's just do it. Let's just see where it goes. And Justin is the best person to do that with because he is just so great to talk to and so fun and adaptive. And so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then we'll get right to it.
Sure. Love it, Chrissy. Thank you. So Justin Hughes, LPC, coming out of Dallas, Texas, y'all. And yeah, so my practice is in Dallas. I'm in private practice and love working with OCD. I don't actually have OCD myself, which always raised a curious question. Why do I love it so much? But 90 to 95% of the clients that I see have OCD, and the rest are anxiety disorders, comorbidities with substance use disorders, and a whole range of mental health. So just love all things OCD recovery and in the advocacy world. Met Chrissy, probably, was it 2015, 2016?
It was 2000. It was at the Dallas conference. Mm-hmm. That was 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago this month. Okay. We met 3 years ago this month.
I love it. Automatically, there was just this initial magnetism, Chrissy. I just really enjoyed the conversation with you, the authenticity. It was just so easy to connect. And so for the audience, we have referred to each other, seen clients mutually at the same time. And I think it's a great example of the benefits that we can see. Sure, we'll talk about the therapy and so forth, but that peer side, there's nothing quite like it. The community side, and that's going to be a big part, I think, of where I see some of our conversation going with spirituality and faith, is that when we're talking about community, there's something there that is different. Facilitates different outcomes. But I digress. So Justin Hughes, Dallas, Texas, love all things OCD recovery.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was actually going to bring it up too. I remember the day we met. I was thinking about this. Literally, it was OCD week. I was in Dallas. I ran a panel chat or something. I don't remember. I remember we were sitting and everything, and I was like, this guy is so cool. And you were super excited, and I just love the energy. And then I was like, of course, thank goodness there's, more referrals in Dallas. So I do whenever I get Texas referrals, I'm always excited because I know they're going to be in good hands. So
yeah, well, and even just in a few short years, I have seen this community of providers grow from, I mean, I can't say exactly what it was, but 3 or 4 people on the IOCDF website, and probably 10 to 15 providers that I knew of that really did ERP. I'm sure there were more that I hadn't heard of, sample size bias on my side, but it's just grown a lot to the point where I personally consult with or know or will email back and forth with 20 to 30, and there has to be way more than that in the area. So that's really amazing for me to see within just a few years.
Y'all got a good crew down there.
It's pretty cool. And Molly Martinez.
Yes, she was on last time.
I was like, Molly, you beat me to it.
I know when I scheduled the two of you, I'm like, they're back to back. I went.
Yeah, and we'll collaborate in different ways. We're in the same provider consultation group here for OCD. Really fun to do that. And interestingly enough, when I moved, I had no idea. I'm walking distance from her and her family, so that's pretty cool too.
Nice. Awesome. Well, if any of you are interested of what we're actually doing here, and this is your first time, these are our Fireside Friday chats. We do them every other week alongside our our sister initiative, which are Monday Mavericks. So that will occur this coming Monday. And this initiative was born out of COVID-19. So there's one good thing that happened with COVID-19. And I started these chats as basically a selfish means to be able to get people's opinion on what was going on. I was feeling isolated and alone, and I knew that the people in our community were. And once the kind of COVID chats kind of ran its course, I thought, this is a great thing to keep doing. And to talk about things in our community that aren't always talked about. We're always talking about treatment. We're always talking about this, but we don't often talk about things like OCD and insurance, like with Molly, and now OCD and spirituality. We've got OCD and addiction stuff. And by the way, thank you for being an addictions counselor. We need more of you. So that's what we're doing here today. Now, before we go into our topic for today, OCD and spirituality, I do want to say we've got not only what we do here, but we've got so much cool stuff coming up to bring our community together in a time where we feel really isolated. Tomorrow night is the first ever OCD Monologues, which is basically an open mic. Hi, Dave. Thank you for being here. Yay. It's a first open mic for OCD Gamechangers. We're running it alongside a penny for your intrusive thoughts. And oh my gosh, we have such a cool lineup. I got to look at all the submissions last night. We have poetry, we have songs, we have funny songs, we have spoken word, we have lived experience. It is going to be so fun. It's $10. Go to OCD Gamechangers website, ocdgamechangers.com, go to the events tab and click on open mic and register. It's going to be so fun and so community building. And then Hard Quirk is a new initiative of advocates. They are going to come on Monday Mavericks, and we're going to do an initiative called #SpookYourself. And we'll talk more about that on Monday. So I hope you'll join us. It's going to be really cool. And it's going to bring awareness to OCD and ERP. And we're going to do it leading up to what's the holiday? Halloween. Yes, spook yourself. And then lastly, we are doing a huge event. We haven't yet. I'm just going to tease you a little. We're doing a big event in December where all the people that came in for the COVID fireside chats, I'm bringing them back on to talk about where they are now. And that's going to happen in December. Each person's going to get like 4 or 5 minutes to check back in. What have they learned? What do they hate? What do they love? How's life? And we're going to run that all night. And it's going to be a fundraiser for OCD Gamechangers and Not Alone Notes in their secret project that we will reveal that night. And it's super exciting. I can't wait. That will be sometime in December. So get ready. Anyway.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So that's what I have to do. So again, go to OCD Gamechangers, buy your ticket for tomorrow, open mic, $10. Now, let's do this. Why is OCD and spirituality a topic that you would like to cover?
Great question. So first of all, I mean, spirituality is so important to me personally and by personal faith. And one of the key things, of course, is to work with people in any background and to walk with them in a way that's meaningful to them. And so when we get into the topic of spirituality, first of all, it's so interesting how it's in and of itself a bit taboo to talk about. Don't talk about what religion and politics, right? In polite company, and sometimes the world goes. Well, Chrissy has long been breaking the rules of what she talks about in polite company. And I like to talk big and say that, I'm that way too. But
Oh my God. I'm quoting that. Go ahead.
Good. And I like to talk big with that, but frankly, it can be really easy for me to then just kind of go with the status quo about conversations. And it's just so important. Most people endorse some form of spirituality or a sense of something outside of themselves, greater than themselves, that they connect with. And largely the rooms of therapy in the most clinical senses have been devoid of conversations. But it's also interesting because when we look at NIH-funded research on spirituality, prayer, meditation, things like that, there are some clear and also some question mark results. that, first of all, it's important to a lot of people, and second of all, that it really seems to make a difference. And so there's that. And then, so two-parter. One, it's actually important to a lot of people, regardless of their background. And frankly, if a person doesn't see it as important to them, that's fine. They can show up and do therapy or do the things that we do, and great, it's good. But there's this other side too that Chrissy, as you well know, personally and the professional side of it, that OCD, I call it the disorder of all disorders. If there's a fear that exists, we're probably going to see it at some point if we walk with enough people who have OCD, because it just plays on any manifestation. So surprise, surprise, that it's going to play on religion, spirituality, purpose, meaning, faith, any number of things. And so if at some level, especially for me as a clinician, if I can't be comfortable, or if I'm not able to talk with a person about what's important to them, and also help them to some extent, or help them get to the direction that they need to go, talk about these things, then we're going to be blocked from potentially some outcomes in the therapy process.
Mm-hmm. So the hard question is this: where's the fine line? And I would love to be able to, at some point today when we're chatting, to share some of my story about the scrupulosity piece and kind of where that took me in my life.
Yeah, I would love
but the hard part, and this is kind of what I struggle with on a professional level, because we have to be really careful about bringing that into, but where is the line between, what's the go-to to help people understand that religion and spirituality is it's not the answer. It's not the cure. Because as we know with OCD, there's very much, for those of us that have OCD, we would love to wake up tomorrow and it not be there. All the thoughts are gone. And that's the goal, the unattainable goal. But there's also these things in our head that keep us motivated to go. But if I just do this, if I just eat healthier, if I do this, and one of the biggest things that comes into play is if I am a better person, if I'm a better Christian, if I'm a better Muslim, if I have a better relationship with my God, then things will be better. And as many of us with religious scrupulosity found out, that does not work. And that's so I have a lot of questions in that regard. Where's the line in that for a therapist to be able to explain that, to be able to give some psychoeducation of like, I know this is important to you, but it ain't gonna help when it comes to behavior.
No, that's a great point. So as far as a line, not sure about that. I'll lean into my own uncertainty. I wish that there was a phrase or a go-to spot or thing to say specifically, but let me just share the personal experience side of things and conversations. Because of my background and my approach, a lot of people seek me out for if they're out of state. I'm licensed in Texas and Pennsylvania. But if out of state, it's something I obviously can't treat, but I've done consultations where a person has just questions about the role of faith and also the treatment of OCD. And the conversations, we have to just really be honest about, hey, what is happening in your life that, of course, leads you to counseling in the first place? I mean, right away, that is the gold mine right there. So if a person, first of all, thinks that if they just pray more, for example, that maybe their OCD will go away, then let's look at that. And let's just kind of be objective, look at the truth of that, examine the evidence. In CBT terms, we're going to talk about examining the evidence and what the belief about that is. A lot of Christians love CBT because of belief and truth and things like that. But we're going to look at it from just an honest process to say, okay, do you know of anybody who through prayer got over it? And if so, kind of like what was their story? Like, what do you think the role of prayer, for example, or scripture reading or confession, or so on and so forth would be? What has it gotten you? And then second of all, to really understand from a big picture perspective, if a person is holding to a view that somehow this is just going to change immediately or whatever else, like, well, how did you come to that view? Because at least for me, as a Christian working with a lot of Christian clients, that's like nowhere in the Bible that there's a snap of fingers, unless it's a miracle, which is by definition very uncommon, right? So just even using it, to be fair, most worldviews are going to have some foundation for saying, okay, here is a reason why, or even just observing, things don't just change automatically because you just do one thing or you just do one thing well enough, and rather have a lot of conversations about how sometimes those false beliefs can maintain the problem. So we know with OCD, obviously, the overt rituals and confession or confession from a compulsive standpoint or reassurance seeking, of course, is going to make it problematic. But to the extent that a person believes that something that doesn't fit with reality is going to fix them, they're going to be engaged and focused with their time and energy there instead of focused on what the reality of that is. And so I guess I take also kind of a practical approach in addition to being like, show me the money. Like, where's the proof that you have that this thing's going to be solved by fill in the blank?
Yes. So this is probably also a little bit of a maybe difficult like stretch. But this is why I love these conversations, because it just brings up so much. And this is a little bit reflective of my own experience. What is it like as a therapist to work with people who, and I do want to explain like religion, the easiest way I explain religious scrupulosity is when religion gets involved in your OCD and all of a sudden becomes very dominant, and all of a sudden you're having doubt and you're doing all these compulsions. I have prayer rituals. I had like repentance rituals. I had like making sure I was a good person so I wouldn't get punished with bad thoughts, all those things.
Yeah, which, to be clear, of course, can be for a person who's an atheist, a person who's Christian, Jewish, fill in the blank. It doesn't matter who it is. It does not. It's an equal opportunity employer, so to speak.
Equal opportunity OCD.
Yeah, exactly.
But what is it like as a therapist, and how do you support your clients when, or this might not even happen, but for me it did, when people find out that the relationship that they had with whatever their relationship with religion was isn't real, and it was just OCD. Now, I'm not saying that their relationship isn't real and that the love and the faith isn't real, but as we know, it's like relationship OCD. Like, I love my husband and I know that love is real, but if OCD latches on, all of a sudden I'm over here in la la land going, do I really love him? Do I really this? And so what is it like as a therapist to walk with someone who comes to the realization of, oh my gosh, like all of this stuff wasn't really about my relationship with whatever God or whatever not having a God represents? What is that like?
Yeah, I gotcha. So walking with folks when there is a realization of, oh my goodness, like, was this just an obsession? Or was it that's kind of the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Well, yeah, that's, first of all, that can be jolting, especially in early recovery with OCD. And that happens with other themes as well. And we know too that even just in the research, though OCD is ego dystonic, it's something that I don't want to do and so forth, we know that some compulsions feel a lot better, or some patterns actually are reported as is wanted in some ways. And that gets, of course, complex, breaking it down in different ways.
I know, I was going to say,
if you have any complexity with it. Yeah, exactly. So talk to your therapist about that. Wait, what? Egocentonic, ego dystonic? I thought I had this figured out. Yeah. So Yes.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So there's a lot that occurs with, I think I lost my last point, but I'll just keep going. There's a lot that occurs in the process or life cycle of growth, period, and with OCD. And so it can be shocking. Different themes will come up where a person is like, wow, oh, like cleanliness, or related to even sometimes those patterns that people get into avoiding topics that will elicit fears of harm or hit and run OCD. And the person's just coming to terms with, holy cow, I've never even gone to a live concert because of being around too many people. And what if there's not an emergency exit that I can get to quick enough? And this happens also with panic disorder, agoraphobia, and so forth. So at some level, there's a blessing and curse side to it, that if I get into recovery, it's going to shake up things. And we say that we want that on paper, but the actuality of that, when we first face it, is like, yeah,
yes,
I don't know about this. And so as a therapist, like I do and want to and need to walk with people at every point along the way. And so that's where, yes, like most of the time I want to dedicate to the behavioral components of ERP, with plenty of the cognitive components, more or less when needed, more of the behavioral, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's my commitment, so that people who don't know me know that that's the thing. But that's a really important point, because we're not working with robots. ERP, we have research for a reason, and a lot of great things to keep us on track. But sometimes we have to pause. For some people, it's longer than a few minutes, but at least a few minutes sometimes, and even just do just a little bit of processing, which can actually be a subset of that learning process that we'll look at a lot in CBT and inhibitory learning. If you don't know these terms, feel free to look them up. Not you, Chrissy, but the audience. You know what they are. And it's just walking that road with people with gentleness, graciousness, and also a confidence too, that at some point, when seeing it enough, it helps a lot, where a therapist isn't like, wait, what? Like, you're saying that you're getting back to regular life and you're scared of this, or you had a lot of obsessions about God, and now you don't, but you're scared of that? You want somebody that has had a little bit of experience, or can be patient with you in the process and be humble enough to be like, oh, thanks for sharing that. Let me look into that a little bit more.
It, almost as if and the thoughts that were coming up for me were just how difficult it can be for someone who's, especially with religious scrupulosity, no matter what it's latching onto, having to reevaluate what that relationship is and then figure out what it is moving forward. That's no different than someone who may have pedophilia theme or like the sexual orientation theme, and then now all of a sudden like entering recovery and going, wow, I just wasted 20 years of my life, trying to figure something out, and I don't even know who I am anymore.
Yes, yeah.
The poignant thing with religion is that it's, and I always say this to my clients, and I do use the F word a lot when I say it, is it's messing, but I say the F word, with your eternity. And that's what OCD feels like. Yeah. It's messing with your eternity. And then when you figure out it's OCD and you go through therapy, there's very much this, sometimes this open door and this hole to go through to open up your worldview. And that's really scary for people who've been like focusing for so long on, if I have to be rigid in doing these things or else.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. A common example that I use when, especially teaching the model for ERP is, and I do this sometimes just to be in tune with it, I'll start shaving on the opposite side of the face first, or I'll swap the pant leg that I put on first, just to remind myself that it's tough to change routines and patterns, even in things that aren't producing fear. Like that doesn't create any fear in me whatsoever, or disgust. It is hard to change those things. So at a minimum, yes, that's going to be big. And then because of the theme's presence and what it connects to, attaches to in religious scrupulosity, it's going to attach to a lot of really significant routines in life. Yeah, where it feels like eternity is at stake with those things.
Yeah.
And so that's, walking with a person in that is huge. But in one of the reasons that I love this topic too is that we have to be equipped as clinicians, or not have to, but I think it's great to be equipped as clinicians to make sure that we don't see ourselves as a therapist as the end all be all, because there's so many things in the life cycle of a person that will be part of their growth. We were talking a few minutes ago, Chrissy, about the growth of OCD Gamechangers. And you were just talking about just being a support to the people that have ideas, and you love being able to say yes, and like, that's great, and not micromanage those things. And at the same time, like, those of us behind the scenes are going to look at it, and there's a lot of people behind the scenes, but you're the driving force of OCD Gamechangers. But the reality is there's a lot of pieces that no one person could create. And the same is true when we deal with a person's walk who has OCD, that there's going to be a whole lot of things that come up. And so one, we can definitely do a lot of work in therapy for sure about grieving what was lost.
Yes.
It's 20 years of life, it feels like, or, oh my goodness, or maybe it's grieving in this weird sense that a person doesn't have as much disability caused by the OCD because they were used to certain patterns, and people feel really conflicted about that. That's, wait, why do I feel weird, or why do I feel sad? By the way, anxiety and depression are oftentimes flip side of the same coin. If a person's nervous system has been on fire for a long time and then they slow it down, homeostasis results in this balancing, depressed mood comes up, etc. So walking with people, but pointing people to those resources that are going to help them more than the hour or 2 or 3 of therapy that they're doing in a given week, or every couple of weeks, or once a month. So community resources. And then that's where we look at the church, the synagogue, the mosque, etc. Like, hey, so according to your beliefs and values, like you're saying that this community is really important to you. Many times part of what OCD steals from people is, or would be, the things that they would be doing otherwise if they didn't have OCD, because they're trying to avoid triggers. They don't want to hear that sermon, or they don't want to hear that message that's going to trigger them. And so part of it is helping point them back to what is it that they believe in, and those principles, the things that they want to be pursuing, and also what's going to help facilitate that growth process.
So that brings me to another question, and just saying that, which would be, often people are relying on religion. So this is taking it out of a little bit more of the OCD realm and more, or the scrupulosity realm, into, people often rely on religion for a coping mechanism. And so they rely on that community or the ability to go and feel, connected to their faith. But then if they have these really tough pedophilia, harm themes, incest themes, these themes that we know are huge and rampant, but we have a church system that, and in all different religions, that would be probably monumentally horrified if they didn't understand OCD. This is where people can feel really disconnected from their community, disconnected and almost like preemptively rejected from their community before they're even able to share with people. What are your thoughts on how to approach a church, a pastor, your community in getting support and explaining that I worry I'm a pedophile all day, but I'm still a Christian. Can you please support me? That. People are terrified of that, because historically the relationship in the church of mental illness, they ain't doing a good job. And you're in the South. It's really not doing a good job in the South.
So, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes. Man, you are pulling out the good questions. I love it. Uh, so, first of all, I think that, yes, like different spiritual environments in different ways have done a really, really poor job. But I see that one, getting the right information out there throughout the history of the human race. There are all sorts of examples where whole groups, cultures, etc., believe in one thing. You know, the sun and the moon and the earth and relation and so forth, and everybody is so convinced. And this is humility is just one of the big things that that I want to be about in my life, is staying humble, staying open, having conversations, talking, hearing, listening. Because a lot of times, right when we put our foot down, that stick in the sand, I mean, there are some things to put a stick in the sand for, but probably a lot fewer than a lot of folks. I'm going to call it out, at least for in my experience in churches and so forth, probably fewer issues than a lot of people put their foot down over. Really, carpets or hardwood in the entryway? Really, whether you have an organ or not, or more of a rocky band. And then obviously getting into way more complex topics of mental health, etc. But when I look at, or when I walk with clients, I see that it's a problem across the board. That I would say 70% of the clients that I see, I'm getting a significant other or family member in the session with them. I'd like to see that number at 100%, but of course it's not going to fit everyone. And I'd say most of the time there are definitely some real misunderstandings that I have to correct. Some people have done their research and are aware, but all I have to do is look at the fact that it's kind of everywhere. So OCD, clo OCD, whatever it is. There's so many. Yeah, close OCD. Yeah. See, I don't even follow Khloe Kardashian, but anyway.
The fact that I even know that is pathetic.
Yeah. So there's just going to be so many examples around us, but more to the topic of what do we do with that? Well, that's one of my key passions, is to engage on this topic and to educate, to teach, etc. Doing a lot of writing currently and finding ways to just have those communications with clergy, for example. One of the coolest ways is simply doing my job. Like if I'm doing it well, I'm going to have a number of conversations with priests, pastors, rabbis, so on and so forth, to really walk with a client. That's just like with family members. And so if I'm doing that, I have such an opportunity, just like in the clinical realm. It's great networking to work with a psychiatrist, which I do often to confer. And so just leaving it in everybody else's hands, like, let's organize this, let's do it as a team. And I've been surprised at how many myths I've been able to just maybe straight out correct, but information I've been able to give even to psychiatrists. So when it comes to the church, I see it as you're always going to have people involved in any sort of spiritual community. And so I think it's about graciously, humbly going before people and saying, hey, here is an opportunity to really care for some people in some other ways. And if you see this type of struggle, sure, consider me, from a referral standpoint, but bigger than that, like let's make sure we're looking at the right things and not just make quick assumptions that, oh man, this person is really, on either side, this person is sinning because they are stuck in their anxiety, or the other side. And this is probably the most overlooked one, I think, which is the validation that different church, ministry, etc. environments give for the person who is compulsing out the wazoo, because they're the ones that are showing up, they're asking questions, and at some point, if somebody's not in tune with that, they're going to be like, wow, this is like a super Christian, super Muslim,
Yes.
super. And so
Yes.
this is why it's also important for the education piece.
Right. To recognize when it crosses the line of enthusiasm and interest to
Mhm.
reassurance and
Yeah.
needing answers in order to solve their anxiety.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So dealing with some of that uncertainty with those things really, really key. Yeah, absolutely huge. Staying humble in those conversations, and so I just tried to get out the word in different ways, and because I love working with all things OCD, I'm talking about it often on my free time. Like, oh my goodness, hey, can I tell you about this? And there are just people that don't really want to know, and I try to give them their space, but
I can relate. So here's a question that came up while you were talking. Again, a little bit unrelated, but something that I hear a lot from clients. People are having really terrifying, whether that be scrupulous thoughts, demon possession. I've sinned against God. I've sold my soul to the devil. I have thoughts about harming kids. I have thoughts about, bad thoughts about family, yada, yada, yada. People often settle when the dust is even settling, even through therapy. They often raise the question of, how can I forgive myself for having these thoughts? And I always think that's an interesting question. And
I was just thinking that's an interesting question. Yeah.
To be fair, and if you're listening to this and we've done peer support before you've asked this, I'm not referring to you, but that question really pisses me off. And it brings back a lot of scrupulous stuff for me of this, fist pounding, like there is no need to forgive. Like when this is a biological, illness, there's no, I get so angry, but I also have enough compassion and empathy to know that at one point I was asking that same question of myself. And sometimes still do, not using the words forgive, but just I'm trying to accept maybe who I am. So when clients ask that, or when they're really stuck in this, and we'll take probably the harm and pedophilia as usually, or like the blasphemous thoughts about God. Those I think are like the top three, where people really get stuck in the loop of, I'm getting better through therapy, but how can I forgive myself for even having those thoughts? What would you tell people that are stuck there, that really feel that connection to needing some sort of forgiveness, whether or not it's a forgiveness from a higher power or it's forgiving themselves? I think that the term forgiveness just links it to this bigger and greater thing of they must be this horrible human, which, as we know, OCD produces so much shame and makes us feel bad. That's a loaded word to me. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, you are not holding back with the big questions, Chrissy. Yeah, so thoughts on that would be that, first of all, we're going to have to do some good, in my opinion, I mean, probably a few ways to handle this. If we want to call it cognitive work, with it kind of as a subset of the cognitive therapy. Reed Wilson is probably the key example of a cognitive therapist who does ERP as well. And then secondarily, for those who are big fans of ACT, looking at actual values and commitments, and we're going to have to define some things. So first and foremost, and it's always great, I think, to say what is OCD and what is the treatment. So if you're okay with me saying this, it's going to play right into this. OCD is a disorder that involves intrusive, unwanted thoughts, images, impulses, where a person attempts to alleviate that with these compulsive responses. Yes, there's the puro, of course, category, but there's still mental rituals. There's some attempt to make it go away, some response that drives and continues to maintain these obsessions. And so the treatment is all about, first and foremost, the gold standard treatment is exposure and response prevention, which is a largely behavioral treatment, though it's a subset of CBT. For those that have had terrible experience with CBT, treating their OCD, and they're like, the person didn't know anything about ERP, they were spending most of their time in the C category, C, yeah, there we go. The C category, the versus the B. Now, the reason that I share this, so important for this lead up, is that the research tells us for a couple of types of obsessions, the cognitive work has to be more, usually. And that's sexual obsessions and religious obsessions.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, and frankly, it could be others as well, but those were at least the ones that they
depending
studied.
on the response of the person.
Yeah, exactly. So just had a conversation today about this, that sometimes contamination-based concerns, even though for most people it's very face value, I know, like an hour shower is not what I need to be doing to get clean, blah, blah, blah. It's not always face value. Sometimes I have to really, really do some cognitive work there about what do you believe about this. The whole point of cognitive work is not to engage the content of the intrusion. It's to take any beliefs that a person is actually holding that are distorted or maintain a person's compulsions and rituals. So this is a huge mix-up when people want to talk about the details, like, well, I mean, I guess we should talk about it. Maybe it's important. And I heard that you're supposed to do some cognitive work. Okay, it's very specific. Cognitive work is doing this behavioral experiments. It's looking at the beliefs that are actually held, egocentric, if you will. So we have to call out those things. And when it comes to the topic of forgiveness, first of all, I hate, Chrissy, that you have received all those comments at different points and received that pressure at different times. Like, okay, here's your intrusion. Why don't you ask some forgiveness? Because those are really nasty thoughts. It's like, I get it. That is so frustrating. And
I mean, I'm pretty real in my responses usually. Like,
oh yeah,
you don't need that. What? Like, you know how I am.
Yeah.
But I do like pound fist.
Yeah, definitely.
I do.
So the topic of forgiveness, though, we're going to want to look at that a little bit more and say, okay, well, what warrants forgiveness? Let's define this a little bit more. And most people, when they really understand how OCD works and really understand how the treatment for it works, at least I've described the therapeutic treatments, they can understand, and we can at least make the point initially, that intrusive unwanted thoughts are largely like noise. Like if potato, sex, banana, like, all right, so any person now, the banana, you can't not think about it. It's the classic example, and it's overused probably. And those of you who are like, I've heard that a million times. But if a person really, really understands that, looks at it, a lot of times they may be able to reevaluate their beliefs about the context of forgiveness if they're truly understanding the role of OCD and intrusions, etc. And so my role isn't to be like, that's stupid, but rather to explore it, because I mean, we're all growing in at different parts of the process. Now, one other comment too, with the forgiveness piece, different belief systems will look at this a little bit differently. And I don't know actually how each one of them does look at it, but I'll just take the one that I'm most familiar with as a Christian. The question of, is anxiety sin? I was actually asked this last week.
Cool.
And that's where you're just going to have to tune in December. See y'all later. Exactly. This is there's a lot of uncertainty with that. So there's biblical passages, and this is a lot of stuff that I try to write on as well. Blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, right? Blasphemy, one of the biggest fears. Just put out a post on that today. What scriptures say about fear, etc. Yeah, let me just put it this way. You're going to come across, if you talk to, again, I'm sorry, I don't want to weight it as Christian, but it's, I guess, the experience that I speak from. If you talk to 5 Christians, you're going to get seven different responses, right, on whether anxiety is a sin or not. let's just simplify it. Like the most common directive in all the Bible is do not be afraid, or some version of that, like fear not. And with it as well, it's offering different points and direction, tons of case examples of, well, this person was losing their mind or freaked out or running the opposite direction or whatever else. And so when we actually look at the whole of that, we can recognize like, okay, maybe theoretically there's this aspect that as a Christian, maybe it is something where it's like, well, at some level, maybe there is a lack of faith. And I'm going to say that for myself in my own anxiety. Sure. Like there are plenty of times where I am lacking faith, but the problem I think is in the question. It's reductionistic to ask, oh my goodness, do I need forgiveness for these terrible thoughts? Well, do you need forgiveness for walking past a book in a bookstore that talks about genocide? Or I think the question is interesting because if we really dig deeper, what is the question? That's just a very nebulous thing of maybe I feel like I need forgiveness. Let's actually look at what your belief says. Do you really need forgiveness for this? And if so, like, well, what's the implication? But a lot of times the question, as you shared it, is, yeah, I think it sounds like it's a lot of times just out of fear and out of shame, etc. And that's just counterintuitive to every point in the process, be it ERP or be it really approaching this topic by faith.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts, opinions, and I also have to say too, so Stuart Ralph interviewed me on OCD Stories, and I was surprised because I didn't know it was going to go this way. We talked about spiritual things as well. Big thing that I want to say is that there are going to be people of all sorts of different backgrounds listening to this, and I think that's the beauty of this. We can have these conversations and talk about these things. So, big thing, and I tell clients this as well, like, if a person asks my opinion of understanding of something, sometimes I won't give it because it's not mine to give. But second of all, like, I'm one person talking about this. It's so important that we dig into these things, have conversations, and go to the community of people around us that can help us kind of work these things out, or tell us don't work that out because that's compulsive.
Mm-hmm. I think, in my comments, and we'll probably wrap up here in a minute, but I'll get your final thoughts though. When we first started talking about this today, it was, talking about spirituality and religion, it's like politics, you don't talk about it. And, growing up in the South, that was, you weren't supposed to talk about it at the same time in the South. It's like people ask what church you go to first before what you do first.
That is weird, Max.
You really
talk about it.
Talk about it.
Yeah, but yeah.
But in my own experience, I would say that the biggest the worst thing ever growing up with religious scrupulosity mixed in with sexual intrusive thoughts and everything else that I had would be to change my belief system from what I was taught and what I was holding on so tightly to with religious scrupulosity. So the fear for me when I found out that this was OCD, my first reaction was relief. I was like, wow, okay, this isn't my fault. And I'd been doing prayer rituals and doing all this stuff for so long, thinking that God was punishing me. And my second reaction was anger. And that reaction was, was very prevalent even for the next 10 to 15 years over the loss and first of all, the anger of what I was taught religious wise, because I felt like it fed into like why I was, but the same part, like that I had such a damaged relationship with religion because of OCD. But I wanted to share this because the fear was, I quickly in the next year tried to shift this. Okay, well now, like, I'm so grateful that God brought me to Dr. Stephen Phillipson. I was trying to hang on still to this image of what I thought religion should be when a lot of times with OCD, you find out after treatment, you have developed really negative coping mechanisms because you're just trying to survive. And so what I want to share with you, if you're listening today and you have struggled with a religious scrupulosity, or if you are and you're still in that state, is I don't like to talk about my religious views, or my spirit. I identify more as spiritual, but that it's okay to have the door opened up to explore something, even though it has been dictated by fear. At the time, I was very scared that how is this going to change, and what does this mean, and what is my life going to be, and then I'm not going to be this, and I'm not going to be, almost like I craved that control, because then I would know that I was a good person. But what it really did was open up the door, number one, to my worldview. Like Justin said, if we can just talk to different people with different beliefs, no matter what it is, we just get such a greater understanding of humanity and meeting people where they're at. And especially in OCD, it's so important. So when people get wrapped up in the idea of living with religious scrupulosity and I don't know how I'm going to move past this and change your relationship with a higher power and how that's going to impact it, I am here to tell you, you can change your entire worldview and grow your values based on who you are without OCD pulling you around on a leash. And that's what I want to encourage you with today from my own story. I'm so much happier in where I am now spiritually, and and still exploring every single day, still learning from other people, and I would never have found that in the confines of the fear of OCD. So it's okay to take a step in the direction of treatment and recovery and be able to say, I can come out of the grips and I can figure out what it is that I want and I believe without OCD telling me what that is. So those are kind of my final thoughts. What are yours?
Yeah, I love that. I just want to validate too from the clinical side that I have seen. I would say every day. I suppose I don't. It's probably more every week. It's every couple weeks where somebody is graduating through the work that they've done. Again and again and again and again, where people are strengthened as a result of the process. Mm-hmm. And some people are going to hear you, Chrissy, and hear of a reference to being spiritual and trigger alert to them because they're like, oh my goodness, like if I go to a therapist, they're gonna, fill in the blank. And
maybe you will, maybe you won't.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not triggered through this tonight, then we have failed. But the really cool thing is, I'll just make a clinical comment here. What does fear do? Fear narrows focus. Mm-hmm. Fear results in this pinpoint focus. And if it's an alarm system gone wrong, it means that we are going to massively miss out on any number of things, be it exploration or the things that we want it to be about, that we have on paper as an actual goal or belief or value or fill in the blank. And so by the definition of it, we have to take it step by step. It's going to be a hierarchical thing. In therapy, at least a good therapist is not going to ask you to make leaps that, one, you're not willing to make. Second of all, that you can't make at that time. It's a step-by-step process. And it's the definition of the therapy that it's going to help you not be shut down in fear, but then to actually live out your beliefs and values, or have the freedom to explore. And hopefully to some extent it's a little bit of both, because if we don't say that we're growing or exploring or learning at some point, I don't know, like I'm gonna be like, I do not want to listen to that person, because right. I hope we're learning. Gosh.
I think we learn every time we have a fireside chat.
I have so far.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for this discussion. We were talking beforehand. We were like, well, we're not going to plan anything. And I think it was a really great conversation that brought up a lot of stuff for everybody to think about. And I hope that all the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed it as well. But Justin, thank you for who you are. Thank you for being part of our community. We're better because of you. And I just appreciate your support of OCD Gamechangers.
Thanks, Chrissy. It's just such a joy to walk with you. You're so much fun to talk with. And yeah, just joining this journey.
Thank you. And to all the people that joined today, just want to let you know that OCD Gamechangers welcomes anyone into our community. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what race you are, what anything, any ethnicity, whatever it is. We are welcoming of every single person. We are an OCD focused organization. However, if you have anxiety or if you have anything, you can always come to us and we will welcome you with open arms, because we all are in this together, walking alongside each other to help grow and learn, support, and just help life be a little bit better, because you belong somewhere and you belong here. So thanks for being part of Fireside Friday. I look forward to seeing you on Monday at Monday Mavericks. We'll have Hard Work on. They're super new, and they're so motivated and excited. I can't wait for you to meet them. And open mic. Go to OCD Gamechangers right now. Buy your ticket, $10. All proceeds go to OCD Gamechangers. We're doing this with a penny for your intrusive thoughts. So much fun. Can't wait for you to see the acts. See you tomorrow night. Be there. Bye.